How's it going, guys? We're finally here. UFC 266 is tomorrow. We finally get to see Brian Ortega take on Alexander Volkanovski for the 145-pound title. And, of course, the return of Nick Diaz. He hasn't fought in 6 years since he fought Anderson Silva. He's taking on Robbie Lawler in their rematch. I can't wait, man. It's going to be so great. This card is so stacked. You have Dan Hooker returning after his loss to Michael Chandler. That fight's going to be a banger. Marlon Moraes against Merab. We're going to see if Moraes can snap his little skid here, or if Merab can take his place in the top 10 of the division. What a card, guys. What an absolute banger. I love it. I can't wait. That being said, today, I would also... Well, actually, first, I'd like to apologize for missing the Till and Brunson event. I was out of town. Didn't get to be able to break that down. And for the Smith and Span event, I had some things pop up where I just couldn't get to it in time. But I made absolute sure everything was clear because I was not going to miss UFC 266. I cannot, as a fight fan, miss this card. It is too good. I'm too excited. That being said, today, unlike the last video, we're going to break down 3 fights instead of 2. That's right, 3 fights instead of 2. We're going to look at Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler 2, Valentina Shevchenko versus Lauren Murphy for the women's flyweight title, and of course, Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega for the men's featherweight title. I am just so excited for this card, guys, and we're going to jump right in with Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler 2. Wow. Let me just say that still feels so surreal that Nick Diaz is fighting tomorrow. It's been 6 years since he was wrongfully suspended for marijuana. It's been 6 years since he fought Anderson Silva. It's been 6 years since we saw the older Diaz brothers step in the cage. He's now 38 years old. He has clearly aged. He's clearly been through a lot. He's tried other things, and yet here he is again, fighting tomorrow night against a man he knocked out cold 17 years ago. This fight scares me, and it's hard. There's so many X factors in this fight that it's hard for me to pick a winner. Robbie Lawler has obviously not looked like the same Robbie Lawler that he used to be. Any means. The aggressive terror of the ruthless, the one that ruled the 170-pound division not too long ago. A few years ago, in fact. He just doesn't exist anymore. And that's a sad truth a lot of us fight fans have had to come to terms with in this little skid that he's been on. You know, he's lost 4 in a row. He hasn't won since he beat Donald Cerrone. That's his only win in his last 5 fights. But we're going to turn the clock back to when he was champion. He had a terrific run as champ. 2 of the most exciting fights in the history of the UFC against Carlos Condit and Rory McDonald. And there's 2 fights against Johnny Hendricks as well. Fantastic fights. But those wars that he was in, especially primarily the one with Carlos Condit, they seem to have changed him. Because right after he beat Carlos Condit by split decision to defend his title for the second time, his very next fight, he was knocked out cold in the first round by Tyron Woodley. He then took some time off, and he fought Donald Cerrone and went to another violent war in which he got his hand raised. Since then, things have not gone Robbie's way. And it's been sad to see as a fight fan. Lawler he's a fan favorite for a reason. The man used to be a terror. Watching him fight was always so fun. But since that Donald Cerrone win, he tore his ACL and got battered by RDA. He got battered by Colby Covington. He had that controversial loss to Ben Askren where he actually looked decent, but still didn't get it done. And then he got dominated by Neil Magny. Tomorrow night, he's fighting Nick Diaz for the second time. The last time those 2 fought, Robbie Lawler wasn't even in his prime, and he got knocked out. He's a very different fighter today than he was back then. The aggressive, ruthless Robbie Lawler, again, no longer exists. We're now left with a more passive, more calm Robbie Lawler. A man that instead of swinging back for the fences, getting in your face and just pressuring you, he instead turtles up along the cage and kind of just bobs and weaves when things start not to go his way. He did it against RDA, he did it against Colby, and he did it against Neil Magny. Just kind of let them have their way with him against the cage. And that was sad to see. All three of those fights were sad to see. He looked great against Ben Askren. Of course, you had the controversial submission loss where he didn't tap and he didn't go out, but the referee stopped it anyways. But, that happens from time to time. And normally, in normal circumstances, with the stylistic matchup here, and with the way Robbie has looked his last few fights, I would pick Nick Diaz to win easily. Nick is a volume puncher. He gets up in your face. He doesn't go for power. He goes for number of strikes. He hits you. He touches you. He touches you. He touches you and just keeps backing you up and swinging more and more and more to the body, to the head, combination after combination. With that kind of style and the way Robbie Lawler has looked his last few fights, I would say Nick Diaz should win this fight. I would say that most likely Robbie would turtle up and let Nick kind of have his way. But again, Nick Diaz has not fought for 6 years. Robbie, even though he's on a 4-fight losing streak and he doesn't look like what he used to, he has been more active. He has. And that is a huge X factor in this fight, is how is Nick going to look after 6 years off? I mean, he's 38. He's only 1 year younger than Robbie. He's also had a lot of wars in his career, a lot of damage, and who knows what happened to him in these last 6 years. He talked about it a lot and said that he had been through a lot. So stylistically, I would like to take Nick to win this fight, but there's so many X factors in here, man. Like, how is Nick going to look after the long layoff? Is Nick even the same style of fighter anymore? Can he even do a cardio-pushing fight like that at 38? How much has the damage he's told in his fighting career taken a toll on him? It's just, is his chin still going to be there? The famous Diaz chin. Because Robbie may not be the same fighter, but he absolutely still has that power. And if he connects on Nick and his chin isn't there anymore, we might not see Nick get out of this fight without being knocked out. And it's really hard for me to pick a winner in the fight because there are so many X factors. And again, stylistically, normally, Nick Diaz would be a stylistic nightmare for a guy like Robbie Lawler, especially at this stage in his career. But the inactivity versus the activity. And not just that, but the mental aspect. Nick has all week acted like he doesn't want to be here. He's talked about how he doesn't want to fight anymore, but he feels like he has to. Like, he tried other things, it didn't work out, and he just so he came back to fighting. He might be here because he needs money. Kind of like an Evander Holyfield situation where he's old and he comes back just because he needs the money, not because he wants to fight again. And that's dangerous. When you look at Robbie Lawler, he's smiling. He wants to be here. He's excited to fight Nick. He's fired up for this. He doesn't care about getting the title anymore. He's past that stage of his career. Now he just wants the big fights. This is a big fight for him. A chance to avenge a loss from 17 years ago. A chance to beat a big name and get a big payday. This is huge for Robbie, and he says it's lit a fire under him. He wants to be here. He wants to fight Nick. Nick doesn't want to fight Robbie, and he's said that multiple times. Nick doesn't want to fight. Nick thinks he has to fight. And this is kind of a Diaz brother thing, so maybe we shouldn't read too much into it, because the Diaz brothers do say stuff like this a lot, and it doesn't normally play a factor, but that there's something different about it this time. Like, Nick genuinely just didn't feel like he wanted to go out there and do this. He was worried. And the mental aspect, if I had to say it, I would say Robbie is in a better place mentally than Nick is right now. Nick has been even talking about how these last 7 months alone, Nick has talked how he's been stressed out, how a lot of things have happened, how he's just struggling. Robbie is in the right place mentally. He's excited. He wants to fight. He wants to get in there with Nick. I think that's another huge X factor here. So again, it's really hard to pick a fighter here. This has the potential to be fight of the night or the saddest fight of the night, depending on how both guys look. Robbie Lawler is 39 years old. Nick Diaz is 38. Both guys have a lot of miles. Nick hasn't fought in 6 years. Robbie has been out for a decent period of time. Not 6 years decent, but a decent period of time. He's lost 4 in a row. He's been through a lot of wars in his career as well. This fight is exciting. It's surreal, but it's scary. Because who knows how those two are going to look in that cage tomorrow night. I don't want to see either get knocked out. I think that would be very depressing. They're both legends of the game. I don't want to see either one go unconscious. I'd rather this fight go to a decision. I want a 5-round war, but again, it really just depends on how these guys look in there tomorrow night. And with the long layoff, with the mentality, I think I might have to take Robbie Lawler to win this one, guys. I don't know. He just feels like he's in a better place mentally, like he's excited to be in there tomorrow, like he can't wait. Whereas Nick just looks like he's going through the motions, like he's doing it because he has to, not because he wants to. And just, I think Robbie's either going to take him to a decision and beat him that way, or maybe even get a late TKO, depending on how Nick's body and his chin hold up. I can obviously see Nick winning this fight if he comes out there and he turns back the clock and he looks like the old Nick Diaz and he's just playing possum or whatever. But at this moment in time, I think I'm going to take Robbie Lawler, either by a decision or a late TKO. And that brings us to the women's flyweight title fight. Valentina Shevchenko takes on Lauren Murphy. This is Shevchenko's 6th defense of her title. If she wins Saturday night, she will tie Ronda Rousey for the most consecutive title defenses in women's MMA history. I say if, but if I'm being completely honest, I don't see Lauren Murphy winning this fight at all. Valentina is too good. She is leagues above anyone in that 125-pound division. The only two people I see even being a threat for her in that division are Jessica Andrade, who she's already beaten, and Tatiana Suarez. Those are the only two. Other than that, Valentina is so many leagues ahead of the rest of the competition. There's a reason she's defended this title 5 times. There's a reason she's dominated everyone she's fought in this division. There's a reason she dominated most of the competition she fought when she was fighting at 135 pounds. Valentina is arguably the greatest women's fighter right now. Her only competition being Rose Namajunas and Amanda Nunes. I think she's very clearly better than Rose. I think if those two were to fight pound for pound, Valentina would most likely dominate her. I know Nunes has 2 wins over her. I know Nunes is the women's GOAT by hands down. However, I haven't seen a lot of improvement for Nunes these last couple years. I have seen improvements from Valentina. She keeps getting better. And that's the issue here. It's why the rest of the division can't seem to catch up with her, because she's still getting better. She was already leagues ahead of them, but when she's still improving, there's just nothing that the competition can do to catch up. And if Valentina and Nunes were to fight for a 3rd time, I can't say with confidence that Nunes would win that fight. Valentina has become so good. And I gotta be honest, guys, I don't see a way Lauren Murphy wins this fight. Lauren Murphy's tough. Probably one of the tougher girls in the women's MMA. She's scrappy. I just don't think it's going to be enough. I think she's going to walk forward. I think she's just going to eat counter shot after counter shot, walk right into takedowns, and just get pummeled. I don't even see her making it all 5 rounds, to be honest. I know Valentina has this pattern where she'll finish somebody and then the next fight she'll go to the decision. But I don't see this fight going 5 rounds. I think Valentina is most likely going to finish Lauren Murphy. I think Valentina's counter-striking, her technical striking, her fight IQ, her footwork, and her grappling, all that combined is just going to be too much for a girl like Lauren Murphy. I just don't think Murphy has the skill set to deal with it. For Murphy to win, she's got to make it gritty. She's got to make it dirty. She's got to get in Valentina's face, clinch it up, pot shots, dirty boxing, hopefully get a takedown and just volume until Valentina cracks or just win on the judges' scorecards. And I just don't think she can. I think she's going to try, but I think she's just going to keep eating counters as she walks forward. And if the fight does go to the ground, I don't think Lauren Murphy could hold Valentina down. I think Valentina might have the advantage in the grappling as well. So there's really not a lot about to say this fight. I think Valentina is quite clearly the better fighter of the two. I think Valentina easily is going to defeat Lauren Murphy tomorrow and defend her title for the 6th time to tie Ronda Rousey's record. And then after that, I don't know who's left. Titania Suarez is still out. She's pretty much cleared out that division of contenders. She seems to enjoy doing it too, just beating these guys and dominating them. So if Nunes gets past Juliana Pena, which she probably should, I feel like the next logical step would be that trilogy fight between Shevchenko and Nunes. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. I don't mean to disrespect Lauren Murphy to any of her friends. Fans or whatever, or even to her. I don't see how she wins this fight. I don't think she has the skill set. She's very confident, which is nice to see, and she is very tough. But I think Valentina is just too good. So I think it's going to be very dominant, and I think she submits Murphy in round 3. And finally, that brings us to the main event of UFC 266. Featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski makes his second title defense against Brian Ortega. This fight I have been so excited for since it was announced. Obviously, it got delayed. Then they came back. They did the Ultimate Fighter together. There's a little bit of bad blood from their time on the show together. Volkanovski doesn't really seem to like Ortega very much, or it mostly seems to be on Volkanovski's side. Ortega doesn't really seem to care all that much. But man, this is a good fight. Volkanovski, obviously, both guys share a common opponent in Max Holloway. Volkanovski fighting him twice and winning both times. Ortega fighting him once for the title back in 2018 and getting battered. But Ortega has fought once since then. Volkanovski has not fought since he beat Max the second time last year. Both guys have been out for a while. For Volkanovski, it's been over a year. For Ortega, it's been almost a year. And I have to say that in his time off between the Max fight and the Korean Zombie fight, Ortega improved dramatically. Very dramatically. His footwork was better. He changed his stance. His stance was entirely different. He went from a traditional kind of boxing-like stance to a more karate, wide-based stance. His range control got a lot better. His selective counter-striking got better. And he still managed to keep what made him good in the first place. Make no mistake, Ortega is not the technically best fighter in the division. Ortega is not the most skilled fighter in the division. What Ortega is the best at doing is creating opportunities. He is an opportunistic fighter. And it's why he has so many finishes. He sees an opportunity or he creates an opportunity and he takes it without hesitation. And that's what makes him so dangerous. It's how he knocked out Frankie Edgar. He was the first man to finish Frankie Edgar. It's how he submitted Cub Swanson. It's how he beat Korean Zombie. He's opportunistic. He's not a strategic fighter. He's not tactical. He's not super overtly technical. But he is opportunistic, and he is a very good counter-striker. And his footwork and his range control has improved drastically, and he is just a dangerous fighter. And who knows how many more improvements he's made since then. Realistically, I don't know how much more he could make with his time on The Ultimate Fighter taking up a lot of his time. You know, he was in training camp with the Volkanovski camp earlier this year, and then that fight fell through because Volkanovski caught COVID. So we'll see. Volkanovski is the champion for a reason. He is incredibly well-rounded, arguably the most well-rounded fighter on the roster. He can wrestle. He has jiu-jitsu. He has great striking. He has great defense, great footwork. Volkanovski can do it all, and he can beat you anywhere. He can fight those long, tactical, strategic matchups, or he can fight that firefight. He can finish you, or he can outpoint you. He can do it all. And this fight is very stylistically interesting. On paper, Volkanovski appears to be the more skilled fighter. But Ortega is so opportunistic that he could capitalize on the slightest mistake Volkanovski makes. Ortega Offensively, very opportunistic, like I said, but recently he has added very good footwork and range control to his weapons. He controls range a lot better than he used to. So now instead of having to eat punches as much as he used to make those opportunities, he can now make it without taking all that damage. And he did that against Korean Zombie. He did that very well against Korean Zombie. Another thing Ortega improved was his takedowns. Ortega's wrestling was not very good. He's obviously got elite jiu-jitsu, but his wrestling was not very good. However, against the Korean Zombie, he showed maybe not that his wrestling was better, but how he used it was better. He was using it as a feint to keep to distill Korean Zombie's pressure. Korean Zombie, when Korean Zombie got Ortega moving backwards, Ortega would level change and grab the leg, which would immediately offset Volkanovski's pressure, and then Ortega could move forward with a strike, or he could circle out. And then Korean Zombie was no longer pressuring, because that was where Korean Zombie was most dangerous, when he was the one moving forward and pressuring Ortega. And Ortega used those level change and those takedown feints to offset that pressure and attack with his own offense or circle out. And that's another thing to improve, his footwork. His footwork before the Max fight was fairly basic. He knew how to circle out. He knew how to somewhat cut off the cage. He didn't really know how to use it defensively or how to move away or how to move in and out very well. Against the Korean Zombie, that appears to have changed. He appears to have mastered the ability to just cut off the cage. He seems to know how to circle out much better now, so he's not circling out into his opponent's power or into a trap. And he definitely knows how to move in and out quickly now. What hasn't seemed to change for me, and again, it's been a while since he last fought, so this could have changed, but what hasn't seemed to change for me is his defense. Yes, his range control and footwork are better, and he's gotten a lot better at moving out of the way of strikes, but his head still stays on the center line. He doesn't move his head much, and his blocking. He likes to use the high elbow guard or the Philly shell, and he likes to shoulder roll, and he likes to roll with punches. That is Ortega's main source of defense. Now he's added in being able to bounce out of the way with his footwork, but he still did that a lot. And the issue with that is with a high feint fighter, a fighter that uses feints well, he can draw that defensive reaction out of Ortega and then punish him for it. And that's what Max did to him. Max used so many feints in that fight to draw reactions out of Ortega and then punished him for it. Got Ortega to try and roll before the strike was actually thrown, then throw the strike and hit him clean. Max did it to him over and over and over again. And even Korean Zombie was able to get some defensive reactions out of Ortega and then land because he did it too early. And if those two can do it to Ortega, then Volkanovski absolutely can do it to Ortega. Volkanovski is another high feint fighter. He uses feints very well. He sets, and that's something Ortega is going to have to be careful of. Volkanovski will try to get those defensive reactions out of him, and if he does, Ortega has to be careful to not buy into that feint and then let Volkanovski land clean. Hopefully, Ortega has improved his head movement and his blocking. We will see. But another thing that it concerns me with that style of defense is now it seems Ortega is pretty reliant on that, plus his ability to move out of the way before strikes happen. When Korean Zombie was able to negate Ortega just moving out of the way before the strikes could land, Ortega's defense was pretty much the same as it was in the Max's fight. Philly shell, shoulder roll, roll with the punch. You can hit him clean that way, though. That's the issue. You can hit him clean that way. And that's when Korean Zombie did land, that's usually how he landed. Ortega would try to move out of the way, and Zombie would get that defensive reaction and then land clean. Max did it to him over and over again. Volk carries a lot of power in his hands. If he lands clean on Ortega, it could do a lot of damage. Now, Volkanovski is not as high volume or as high pressuring as Holloway is. He can be. He's shown that he can fight at a pretty fast pace, but he doesn't have the volume or pressure that Max does. But he does have the feints. He can draw out that defensive reaction, and something that's even more concerning about that is Volkanovski's leg kicks. Volkanovski has very good leg kicks, And with Ortega's wide stance and the way how heavy he is on that lead leg, I have to figure that leg kicks are most likely in Volkanovski's game plan. And if he starts beating up Ortega's leg and Ortega can't seem to defend that, then that's slowly going to start taking away that footwork that Ortega has gathered. And now he's not going to be able to move out of the way of strikes, which is then going to expose those defensive flaws that he still has. So for Ortega to win this fight, he has to have improved defensively. He has to rely on more than just footwork and rolling with the punches to get him through. And number 2 is opportunity. If Ortega sees an opportunity against Volkanovski, he has to take it because there will not be many. And that's actually really dangerous for Volkanovski, is Ortega's ability to create opportunities or capitalize on opportunities. Volkanovski is a very defensively sound fighter. He's a very strategic fighter. He's a very smart fighter. However, he doesn't have the greatest chin, but he does have a very good recovery. And there are a few flaws in Volkanovski's game where Ortega can capitalize, and that's mainly entering and leaving the pocket. When pressuring and moving forward, Volkanovski is vulnerable. When exiting that pressure, when exiting the pocket for that brief second, Volkanovski is vulnerable. Max capitalized on both of those things and dropped him twice. Mendes capitalized on that and dropped him. If Ortega is able to capitalize on that mistake, it will be more than just dropping Volkanovski. He will most likely finish Volkanovski. So Volkanovski is going to have to be very careful when he's pressuring and when he's exiting the pocket, because those are where his defense is the weakest. Those are the kink in his armor. Volkanovski has shown a great ability to not only fight at range but in the pocket. But like I said, he's very defensively sound. Not just in the fact of footwork and range control, but in his fundamental defense as well. He's got great head movement. He's got great blocking. He just does everything so well. Another thing in his game, in his back pocket, is his wrestling. Volkanovski has very good wrestling. He's got very good grappling. I don't think he'll go to it much in this fight because of Ortega's jiu-jitsu. Ortega's a very big submission threat. So I don't think Volkanovski will go to his wrestling very much in this fight. He might feint level changes or mix up a takedown attempt or two to kind of keep Ortega guessing, but I don't think it will really be a part of his game plan. I think Volkanovski's going to go out there and he's going to try to pressure Ortega, keep Ortega on the back foot where Ortega's not as good, use leg kicks to take away that footwork, and then when Ortega tries to move forward, counter him. Use feints to draw out that reaction and counter. The thing about Volkanovski is, though, like I said, Ortega's not a very strategic fighter. He's an opportunistic fighter. He doesn't come in with a strategy. He waits and makes the reads. Volkanovski is a very strategic fighter. He loves his game plans. But the one factor in this fight that I think factors above everything else is fight IQ. Volkanovski is quite possibly the smartest fighter on the UFC roster. His ability to adjust mid-fight is second to none. When things don't start to go his way, he is able to adjust and completely change the plan to get the fight going back his way. He did it against Max in the second fight. He did it against Chad Mendes. And the thing is Volkanovski can win a fight without those long technical fights going across 5 rounds. He can win a firefight. He can excel in a firefight. It doesn't matter how this fight goes. Volkanovski can adjust and win it. I don't think Ortega can. I don't think Ortega can outpoint Volkanovski. I think Ortega's best bet is a firefight. I think he has more of a chance to get those opportunities. But the issue is Volk can win in a firefight. Volk can win no matter what this fight looks like. He's such a smart fighter. He's so good at adapting and making those reads that it doesn't matter how high-paced the fight is. It doesn't matter how technical the fight is. It doesn't matter how sloppy the fight is. Volkanovski can make the reads, he can adjust, and he can win. We'll take the Chad Mendes fight, for example. Mendes was very high-paced, very up in his face. Even dropped Volkanovski, like I mentioned earlier. Volkanovski was able to recover. He was able to adjust. And even though it was a firefight and high pace, Volkanovski was able to make the reads he needed to make, and he started digging to Mendez's body. tired him out, and got the finish. He made reads in the second Max fight, which was a slower, more technical fight, even after getting dropped twice in the first 2 rounds. Volkanovski is a smart fighter, and I think that fight IQ is most likely going to make the difference. Ortega's opportunistic, and that is scary, especially with Volk's defensive mistakes leaving and entering the pocket. But Volkanovski is smart. I think he'll be able to make the reads he needs to make. I think he'll be able to adjust. And I think he will most likely win this fight. I see it going quite a few ways. I think Volkanovski will outpoint him. I think Volkanovski could catch him with a big shot and hurt him. I can even see Ortega landing and hurting Volkanovski a couple times early in the fight when the Volkanovski adjusts. But I think mainly it'll come down to Volkanovski just outpointing Ortega, forcing him to be on the back foot, beating up his lead leg and countering him and hurting him to all across 5 rounds. I'm not saying Ortega can't win this fight. Ortega can absolutely capitalize on an opportunity and finish Volkanovski. I just don't see him winning if it goes all 5 rounds. I don't see him winning a technical kickboxing match. I don't see him winning a strategic fight, which I think Volkanovski can make this fight happen like that. I think he can make it strategic. And even if it becomes a firefight, I think Volkanovski has the ability to make the reads and adjustments he needs to make to figure out Ortega's weaknesses. And his feinting game and his leg kicks are going to be a big factor in this fight. My final decision in the main event of the evening, I'm going to go with Volkanovski to retain his title by decision. Ortega's really good. I just don't think he was ready for a title shot quite yet. I can't wait for these fights, guys. They're going to be so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. I hope you guys enjoy the fights tomorrow. And I'll talk to you all again very soon.